I'm joined today by Gary Johns. Gary, we've been talking about the role of government in looking after us. I want to talk now about personal responsibility. In your book, Your Body Belongs to the Nation, several times I had these thoughts and questions, and prophetically you, within pages, went on to answer them or address them at least, if not answer them. One of those questions was the issue about alcohol, and specifically the regulations that have been proposed by the health industry around curtailing operating hours and licensing restrictions, and especially in nightclub precincts in some capital cities. That in itself is a great discussion. I was interested in what you thought may have been the real cause behind the success of the Newcastle experiment, and I think that success is worth duplicating. But to the issue of personal responsibility, how much do we owe to the government, to the nation, to look after ourselves?
We owe it to ourselves and to no one else, really. If you say, I owe it to the nation to look after myself, you're on a slippery slope. You may not love your nation as much as you love yourself. You may not love the government of the day. You are essentially handing over power to say to the government, you set the rules, you tell me what's good, what's bad, you help me to be responsible. The moment you do that, it's over. You have handed away the power to govern yourself. Now,
so are we actually disempowering ourselves when we empower the government to tell us what's right and wrong?
Absolutely, yeah. You've handed away the power to intervene in your own life because you're telling yourself that it's not my fault, it's not my issue, someone else did this to me, the government oughta. And you vote every 3 or 4 years to have the government do something for you. And the trouble is, millions of other people are voting to do the same thing. They won't want the same as you, though.
So what do you think about us asking the government to make other people responsible for themselves, to have their own personal responsibility? Clearly some people lack personal responsibility. We see the alarming rates of one-punch kills and glassing of, terrible abuse of alcohol in concentrated areas. We see a lack of personal responsibility becoming epidemic. Now, or prolific, if epidemic's the wrong word. Now, are we giving away some power of our own when we ask the government to take away some power of other people instead of requiring them in other ways to be personally responsible?
There are a couple of bits of this. One, always be sceptical of the headline that says there is an epidemic, or there's more violence than there once was, or more drunkenness, whatever. Almost always wrong. We're living in the least violent times. Nevertheless, one youth who is punched and dies or becomes a quadriplegic or whatever is a tragedy. Can we do something to stop that? This is the question. And who has to pay? So, for instance, there's a lot of good evidence, a lot of good studies that say if we tax alcohol more, you will affect the drinking habits of the moderate drinker. You will probably not affect the habits of the person who drinks too much to excess, the drunk. So taxing alcohol to solve a punch problem, which may or may not be from an alcoholic, is really involving a lot of people in the game and has no great effect on the one punch.
And that's the important part. Is does the policy achieve the desired outcome?
That's right. So you have to keep asking, what are we doing this for? And often the answer from government is, one, get the newspapers off our back. Two, there's a nice little earner in there too. we can put tax up. That's what's happening. So we'll go to the Newcastle example, right? And here in Brisbane and in other cities, there's this worry that there are too many kids roaming the street in the early hours of the morning getting drunk. So we have these lock-ins or lockouts. I can never sort of remember which, but the fact is you try and control movement of young ones. Now in Newcastle, it appeared that the number of violent incidents did decline during this period when the lockout laws were introduced, and people
that
thought,
was the desired result.
That was a desired result. This is good. What caused the result? All right. The police were very careful here, and they found that the real cause in the decline of violence was that the police enforced the bail laws. So in other words, Billy Bloggs, who was a known baddie, was out and about getting drunk, causing mayhem, but he was out on bail and was not allowed to be out at pubs. So the coppers in Newcastle went around and made sure that they enforced the bail application, or the bail laws, right? And the bail laws were enforced. I think they used to fine about 40 people a month, and it went up to 400 a month. So a significant increase in the effort at pinpointing the baddies. That's what caused the decline.
How do they actually do that? They're checking people who are home when they're meant to be, like after midnight?
I guess so. You have a long list. Yeah, there's your 400 baddies in Newcastle. Yeah. Let's go around and make sure they're not there.
I remember the quote from the policeman. He was saying that it's 5% of people causing 90% of the problem. Yeah. And if you just focus on these troublemakers who are on bail, which is fair enough, you've brought yourself to the attention of the law.
Remember the observation of the policewoman who said she's never met a violent person drunk who wasn't also violent when they were sober. We're talking about people, not alcohol, or not just
here's,
alcohol.
I guess something that the judiciary is independent to some extent, but I think what that lady was saying, that policewoman who said she's never met a violent drunk who wasn't violent sober, I think if we removed drunkenness as any kind of excuse for violence, any kind of mitigation whatsoever, we said, hang on, you hurt somebody, you're responsible. You damaged property, you're responsible. Drunk or not, you made a bad decision. If we applied those consequences, the incentive would be there in law to behave yourself, and if you can't behave yourself when drunk, don't get drunk.
Yeah, absolutely. Shouldn't be a distinction, really. And from what I understand, a lot of the shocking behaviour is the combination of alcohol and other drugs, amphetamines or whatever. So a lot of the debate about the taxation of alcohol really has been taken over by government as a source of revenue, because it's lost its sting. We're no longer talking about consequences and the punching and the brawling and all that, because there are other causes, and two, there are other ways to solve problems of violence, like enforcing the bail laws.
Yeah, and the injustice of taxing alcohol to solve the irresponsibility of a very small minority of irresponsible drinkers. The injustice is that all the people who do the right thing, who exhibit self-control, moderation and restraint and responsibility, they're the ones being punitively taxed to amend the behaviour of the irresponsible.
Yeah, that's right. It's a sort of a catch-all. We rope everyone in. You know, are you a drinker? Well, you have to pay for this. Why? I'm not causing any offence. And that's where governments, I guess it's a combination of those who morally would like to see a world without alcohol, to which I say, well, it's not my world, sorry. And some of the medical profession who say, well, you know, I have to sew up these kids every Saturday night. Yeah, terrific, that's your job. It would be nice if it didn't happen, but it does happen. But it doesn't happen anywhere near the extent to which it did. So governments sort of take those two noisy minorities, I must say, put them together and say, well, you know, we can help. but they only help by taxing or setting some rules and lockouts and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, just ask this of government. Let's try an experiment, whatever it is, whether it's bail application laws or a lock-in or a lockout, and see if it works. Test it, measure it in one place
definitely.
and not another.
So
to least invasiveness. You know, don't take over our lives. Let's have a little look, see what works.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to walk away from an experiment and say, that didn't work.
Yeah.
That wasn't effective. Whatever. But governments are sometimes. This is why we get an inflation of regulation. Governments try things and they leave the regulations in place. You know, you must step back. When they don't work, take them away again.
Yeah. So in summary, what do you think we should do about the ever-present fact that there will always be a minority of citizens who are unwilling to be responsible for their own health and behaviour?
Pretty well nothing. You know, if they're not, say someone, if someone gets drunk and hurts someone else, there are rules that will at least try to protect the person who harm might come to, and certainly you impose a penalty on the person who does the harm. You can't stop that beforehand, or it's unlikely you can. But as we shift into other areas of personal behaviour and health, we're talking about people who may eat too much. All right, well, like, you have a big night on the burgers, you know, does that make you a bad person, or you're going to be violent or whatever? No, you may be harming yourself. You might also be having a good time. It's none of my business. So governments have to learn to back off, to simply accept that people are responsible for their own lives, and you should only intervene if it's clear and provable that they are damaging someone else's life. And even then, the intervention has to be effective.
Do you think government has a role perhaps, and I think the solution is culture. There's a drinking culture, there's a violence culture, there's an inhibited culture that then enjoys being uninhibited. Do you think government has a role in evolving our culture towards more desirable values, such as personal responsibility?
Only in the sense that our leaders should be well behaved, should try as much as possible. And I think we should look up to our leaders, but that's quite different to passing a law. You can't pass a law that says you must be a good person.
Yeah, I'd agree. We don't want it to be punitive in that effort. How would government achieve a culture change or work towards a culture change? Public education, marketing campaigns?
We're doing more than enough now. I mean, every time you turn on the television and the radio, there's some Queensland government, federal government, whatever, telling us how to live our lives. Well,
we've certainly achieved a change in tobacco consumption. What are the rates of alcohol consumption over the last 20 to 30 years?
They've declined. I mean, they peaked in the 1960s, and this is per head consumption, has been declining ever since.
Okay.
I can't remember the figures off the top of my head. But the point is, we're consuming less alcohol per head than we did. Now, we may be consuming other things. I don't know. We're living longer, healthier lives. I'd probably say to government, just get off our back. Yeah. Come on. I mean, by compulsion, all children go to school for 10 years at least. And during that period, there are lots of opportunities, we know, where teachers take you through the impact of certain things on your health and how to behave and act properly. Enough's enough.
Yep.
Enough's enough.
In the next segment, let's have a chat about the health lobby, health research, and how much power and influence we should give them and how much we can trust them.
Good.
Thanks for watching. If you really enjoyed that video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Have a look at this great video next, And check out the website for even more interesting articles and episodes later.